The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. I stood in front of an unassuming house, my hand trembling as I rang the doorbell. I had come to pick up a vintage camera I had found on Craigslist, and a sense of unease washed over me. The fading light and eerie stillness of the evening seemed to amplify my apprehension. My name is Ethan, and I had always been a fan of photography. I collected vintage cameras as a hobby, and my collection had grown over the years. When I stumbled upon a Craigslist ad offering a rare camera from the 1950s at a surprisingly low price, I couldn't resist the opportunity. The ad had described the camera as a hidden gem with pristine optics and a timeless design. It seemed too good to be true, but I had exchanged messages with the seller, a man named Samuel, who assured me that the camera was in perfect condition. I had arranged to meet Samuel at his house to pick up the camera in person. The address he had provided led me to a quaint suburban neighborhood where the houses were nestled among towering trees. As I approached his front door, I couldn't help but notice that the lights were off, and the curtains were drawn. I rang the doorbell, and the sound echoed through the silence. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing Samuel, a middle-aged man with a disheveled appearance. His eyes were bloodshot, and his clothes were rumpled, as if he hadn't slept in days. "You must be Ethan," he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. He seemed agitated, his gaze darting around nervously. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, my unease growing with every passing second. "I'm here for the camera." Samuel nodded and stepped aside, allowing me to enter his dimly lit living room. The air felt heavy and suffocating, as if it hadn't been refreshed in days. A sense of foreboding settled over me, but I pushed it aside, chalking it up to nerves. As I examined the vintage camera on a cluttered table, Samuel spoke in hushed tones, his words disjointed and filled with paranoia. He claimed that the camera was more than just a collector's item, that it held a dark secret, a secret that had consumed his life. "Be careful with it," Samuel whispered, his eyes locked on the camera. "It has the power to capture things that shouldn't be seen." I glanced at him, baffled by his cryptic statement. "What do you mean?" Samuel's gaze met mine, and his eyes held a haunted look. "It captures glimpses of the other side," he said. "Images of things that exist beyond our reality. I made a terrible mistake when I first used it, and now I'm haunted by what I've seen." My skepticism kicked in, and I regarded Samuel with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. "Are you trying to tell me this camera is haunted or something?" He nodded vigorously, his eyes pleading. "Please, just take it. I can't have it in my house any longer. It's cursed, and it's driving me to madness." I hesitated for a moment, torn between my fascination with vintage cameras and the unsettling atmosphere of Samuel's home. In the end, my curiosity won out, and I accepted the camera. Samuel's relief was palpable as he practically shoved it into my hands. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I hope you never have to witness the horrors it can reveal." With that, I quickly made my exit, feeling a sense of relief as I left Samuel's eerie house behind. As I drove home, I couldn't help but chuckle at the bizarre encounter. A haunted camera? It sounded like the plot of a cheesy horror movie. Once I arrived home, I placed the vintage camera on a shelf in my office, next to my other collectibles. The room was filled with the soft glow of antique lamps, and I couldn't deny the allure of the camera's retro charm. It was a work of art, and I was eager to test its functionality. I loaded a roll of film into the camera and took a few shots around my office, capturing the vintage aesthetic of the room. The camera operated smoothly, and the images in the viewfinder appeared crisp and clear. I was delighted with my purchase, dismissing Samuel's claims as the ramblings of a troubled man. That night, as I developed the film in my makeshift darkroom, I couldn't help but admire the results. The images were stunning, capturing the essence of my vintage collection in exquisite detail. I felt a sense of accomplishment, proud of my acquisition. But as I examined one particular photograph, my excitement turned to confusion. In the corner of the image, partially obscured by shadow, there was a faint figure, a silhouette that shouldn't have been there. I blinked in disbelief, thinking it was a flaw in the film or a trick of the light. I dismissed it and continued developing the rest of the roll, but my unease grew with each photograph. In nearly every image, the same shadowy figure appeared, lurking at the edges of the frame. It was as if someone, or something, had photobombed every shot. I couldn't explain it, and a sense of unease gnawed at my insides. I decided to put the camera away, chalking it up to a strange quirk and my overactive imagination. But as days turned into weeks, I couldn't escape the feeling that the camera held a dark secret. I began to notice subtle changes in my home, objects moved from their usual places, strange sounds in the dead of night, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. My unease grew, and I decided to do some research on the vintage camera I had purchased. I scoured the internet for any information about its history, hoping to find answers to the strange occurrences in my home. What I discovered sent a chill down my spine. The camera, it seemed, had a dark history dating back to the 1950s. It was rumored to have been used by a photographer obsessed with the occult, a man who believed that the camera could capture glimpses of the spirit world. The photographer had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a trail of unsolved mysteries and tales of paranormal encounters. The camera had been lost to time until it resurfaced in Samuel's possession. The more I delved into the camera's history, the more convinced I became that it held a malevolent power. I couldn't deny the strange occurrences in my home, and I feared that I had unwittingly unleashed something sinister by using it. Desperate for answers, I reached out to paranormal experts and researchers, hoping they could shed light on the camera's curse. But their responses were mixed, some dismissing my claims as superstition while others warned of the dangers of dabbling in the unknown. As weeks turned into months, my life began to unravel. The shadowy figure that had appeared in the camera's photographs became a constant presence in my home, its presence growing more menacing with each passing day. I couldn't escape the feeling that it was watching me, waiting for something. I recorded my experiences in a journal, documenting the strange occurrences and the sense of dread that had consumed me. I also resumed my research into Samuel, hoping to find some clue that could lead to a solution. But what I discovered was even more unsettling. Samuel had vanished without a trace, just like the photographer from decades ago. It was as if the camera's curse had claimed another victim, leaving only a trail of unanswered questions in its wake. As I continued to grapple with the camera's malevolent influence, I received a message from a stranger, an individual who claimed to have information about the camera's true nature. The message was cryptic, filled with warnings and riddles, but it offered a glimmer of hope. The stranger, who identified themselves only as the Seeker, claimed to have encountered the camera's curse before. They believed that the only way to break the curse was to confront the shadowy figure and uncover the truth behind its existence. With a sense of trepidation, I agreed to meet the Seeker, hoping that they could provide the answers I so desperately sought. We arranged to meet at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place cloaked in darkness and secrecy. As I entered the warehouse, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The air was thick with tension, and the flickering overhead lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. I wondered if I had made a grave mistake by coming here. But then I saw the Seeker, a figure shrouded in darkness, standing in the center of the warehouse. They were holding an old photograph, the same image that had appeared in the camera's photographs, the same shadowy figure that haunted my every moment. The camera, the Seeker began, their voice low and filled with urgency. It has captured something beyond our understanding. The figure you see in the photographs is a presence that exists between worlds, a being that has been trapped in the camera for decades. I listened in astonishment, my heart pounding in my chest. The Seeker went on to explain that the only way to break the curse was to confront the shadowy figure and release it from its prison. It was a dangerous and perilous task, one that required great courage and determination. With their guidance, I embarked on a harrowing journey into the world of the supernatural, determined to uncover the truth behind the camera's curse. The path was fraught with danger, and the shadowy figure grew increasingly malevolent as we delved deeper into its realm. As we confronted the figure, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy and sadness. It was a trapped soul, a being caught between worlds, and it longed for release. With the Seeker's guidance, I used the camera to capture one final photograph, a moment of profound connection between the living and the dead. As the camera's shutter clicked, the shadowy figure dissolved into a wisp of smoke, disappearing into the unknown. A sense of peace washed over me, and I knew that the curse had been broken. But the camera remained, a reminder of the darkness it had held within. I couldn't bear to keep it any longer, and I decided to bury it deep in the earth, hoping that it would never again fall into the wrong hands. My encounter with the cursed camera had changed my life forever, and I knew that some mysteries were best left unsolved. As I walked away from the burial site, I couldn't help but wonder about the other cursed objects that might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to ensnare unsuspecting souls. And so, my journey continued, a relentless pursuit of the unknown, a quest to uncover the mysteries of the world beyond our understanding. But I had learned one important lesson, that some secrets were better left buried, that some curses were best left unbroken. The wind howled through the dense forest, rustling leaves and sending shivers down my spine. I stood in front of a remote cabin, my breath visible in the chilly night air. The Craigslist ad had promised a quiet getaway, a place to escape the chaos of city life. But as I approached the cabin, an unsettling feeling settled over me, like a shadow creeping from the trees. My name is Alex, and I'm an avid adventurer. I often sought refuge in nature to recharge my spirit and find inspiration for my YouTube channel. My subscribers knew me as the Wilderness Explorer, and they followed my journeys with unwavering support. This time, I had decided to rent a cabin deep in the woods, A place where I could record my latest adventure and share it with my eager audience. The Craigslist ad had seemed too good to be true, a charming, rustic cabin nestled in a secluded forest, available for a fraction of the usual rental price. The pictures showed a cozy interior with a roaring fireplace and a breathtaking view of the surrounding wilderness. It was the perfect setting for my next video. But now, as I stood before the cabin's weathered door, doubts began to creep in. The woods felt unnaturally silent, as if nature itself held its breath, waiting. I shook off my unease, reminding myself that I was used to exploring far more remote and desolate places. This cabin was just another stop on my journey. I unlocked the door with the key the owner had sent me and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from the flickering flames in the fireplace. The cabin had a rustic charm, with wooden beams and antique furniture that seemed to whisper stories of days long past. I set my camera on a wooden table, eager to capture the cabin's cozy ambience. My subscribers loved these moments of tranquility before I embarked on my outdoor adventures. I wanted them to experience the same sense of peace that I felt when I escaped into the wild. As I began my recording, I couldn't help but feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the cabin held secrets, hidden just beyond the reach of my camera. I brushed it off as my imagination running wild and continued with my introduction. "Hey, everyone," I said with a grin, "welcome back to the Wilderness Explorer. Today, I found this incredible cabin deep in the woods, and I can't wait to share it with you. Just look at this place, it's like something out of a storybook." I panned the camera to showcase the interior, capturing the rustic details and warm, inviting fireplace. But as I focused on the flames, I noticed something strange, a shadow moving in the corner of the frame. It was fleeting, gone in an instant, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light, but my unease only deepened. The cabin, which had felt welcoming at first, now seemed to hold a sinister undercurrent. Still, I couldn't let my imagination get the best of me, not with my subscribers eagerly awaiting this new adventure. I spent the rest of the day exploring the cabin's surroundings, recording footage of the picturesque forest and nearby stream. The unease I had felt earlier continued to linger, like an invisible weight on my shoulders. The sense of isolation was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Night fell, and I returned to the cabin, determined to make the most of my stay. I lit a few candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the cabin's walls. I sat down in front of the fireplace, the crackling logs providing some comfort. As I recorded my nightly update for my channel, I couldn't help but mention the strange feeling that had settled over me. "I know it sounds silly," I said to the camera, "but this place has an otherworldly vibe to it. Maybe it's just the isolation, or maybe it's my overactive imagination." I paused, trying to find the right words. "But there's something about this cabin, something hidden beneath the surface. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I'll keep you all updated as I explore further." With that, I ended the recording and prepared for bed. I climbed into the cozy, antique bed that had been provided and closed my eyes, hoping that a night's rest would ease my unease. But sleep proved elusive. The wind outside had grown fiercer, the trees creaking and groaning as if in pain. Every rustle of leaves and distant howl of the wind sent my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I reached for my phone to check the time, but the screen remained dark. I frowned, realizing that the battery had died. With a sigh, I decided to get up and find a charger in the dimly lit cabin. As I moved through the cabin's narrow hallway, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was not alone. It was as if the very walls were closing in around me, whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. I entered the living room, my steps cautious. The room was cast in an eerie, dancing glow from the candles I had left burning. And then I saw it, a shadow moving on the cabin's wall, distinct and undeniable. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no mistaking it this time. Someone, or something, was in the cabin with me. With bated breath, I turned toward the source of the shadow, and my blood ran cold. Standing in the corner of the room was a figure cloaked in darkness, its features obscured. It was tall, unnaturally so, and it seemed to emanate a malevolent energy. I reached for the camera I had set on the table earlier, desperate to capture evidence of the intruder. But as I fumbled with the device, I realized with growing horror that the figure was moving closer, step by deliberate step. I knew I had to act fast. With trembling hands, I grabbed the camera and turned on the recording. The figure was now mere feet away, its presence suffocating. I pointed the camera in its direction, the flickering candlelight revealing a grotesque mask that covered its face. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond, its hollow eyes fixed on me. It raised a hand, and in its grasp was a long, gleaming knife. My heart raced, and I knew that I was in mortal danger. In a desperate bid to escape, I bolted for the cabin's front door, throwing it open and plunging into the darkness of the forest. I ran through the night, my heart pounding and my breath coming in ragged gasps. The wind howled around me, carrying with it a sense of impending doom. I didn't dare look back, for fear of what I might see. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing onto the forest floor, gasping for air. The sounds of the forest were now my only company, and the feeling of isolation was overwhelming. As dawn broke, I stumbled upon a dirt road and eventually found help from a passing hiker who called the authorities. When the police arrived at the cabin, they found no sign of the intruder. The Craigslist cabin remained shrouded in mystery, its secrets buried deep within the woods. I never returned to the cabin, and I never uploaded the footage I had captured that night. The events of that evening haunted my dreams, and the feeling of being watched never truly left me. To this day, I wonder about the Craigslist ad, the cabin's sinister secrets, and the figure in the mask. Was it a prank, a deranged individual, or something far more sinister? The answers remain elusive, lost in the depths of the forest, a chilling tale that continues to haunt me and my subscribers. And so, the legend of the Craigslist cabin lives on, a cautionary tale for those who seek adventure in the unknown, a reminder that sometimes, the darkness that lurks on the edges of our world can be far more terrifying than anything we can imagine. The flickering glow of my computer screen cast eerie shadows across my cluttered room. It was late, well past midnight, but my obsession with Craigslist had taken hold once again. I was always on the hunt for unique and unusual items, and tonight was no different. Little did I know that this late-night browsing session would lead me down a rabbit hole of terror and intrigue. My name is Sarah, and I was an avid Craigslist explorer. I had stumbled upon countless hidden gems, from vintage furniture to rare collectibles. The thrill of finding the perfect item at an unbeatable price was a rush I couldn't resist. On this particular night, I was scouring the listings for vintage cameras. My passion for photography had led me to collect old film cameras, and I was on the hunt for my next treasure. That's when I stumbled upon an ad that piqued my interest, an antique camera from the early 1900s, complete with leather casing and brass details. The price was a steal, and I immediately fired off a message to the seller. Within minutes, I received a response from a user named Obscura Collector. They claimed to be a fellow photography enthusiast and were eager to part with the vintage camera. We agreed to meet the following evening at an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The location seemed odd, but I had met Craigslist sellers in stranger places. I couldn't resist the allure of the antique camera, and the prospect of adding it to my collection was too enticing to pass up. The next evening, I found myself driving down a desolate road, the warehouse looming in the distance. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting the area into a veil of darkness. I couldn't help but feel a shiver of unease as I pulled up to the eerie, decrepit building. The warehouse was a relic from a bygone era, its windows shattered, and its walls covered in graffiti. It was the kind of place that gave you the creeps, even in broad daylight. I checked my phone to make sure I had the right location, and sure enough, this was where Obscura Collector had instructed me to meet. As I stepped out of my car, the cold night air sent a shiver down my spine. I had a strange feeling that I was being watched, but I brushed it off as nerves. I walked toward the entrance of the warehouse, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The door creaked open with a deafening groan, revealing a cavernous interior bathed in darkness. My heart raced as I cautiously stepped inside. I called out, announcing my presence to anyone who might be lurking in the shadows. "Hello? I'm here for the camera," I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, only an eerie silence that hung in the air like a heavy shroud. I reached for my phone, ready to call off the meeting and make a hasty retreat, when a dim light flickered to life in the distance. It was a small lantern, casting a feeble glow on the floor ahead. I followed the light, my curiosity overcoming my fear. As I approached the source of the light, I saw it, an antique camera resting on a dilapidated wooden crate. It was even more stunning in person, its intricate details and weathered leather casing telling a story of a bygone era. I reached out to pick it up, my fingers trembling with excitement. "That's a beauty, isn't it?" a voice echoed from the darkness, causing me to jump in surprise. I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, their features obscured by a hooded cloak. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step back. "Who are you?" The figure chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. "I'm Obscura Collector. I've been waiting for you, Sarah." My pulse quickened as I realized that I was alone in this desolate place with a stranger who knew my name. Panic threatened to take hold, but I forced myself to remain calm. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice quivering. Obscura Collector stepped closer, the dim light revealing a sinister grin beneath the hood. "I have a proposition for you, Sarah. You see, this camera is no ordinary antique. It has the power to capture more than just images, it can capture moments in time." I stared at the camera in my hands, my mind racing with disbelief. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but the intensity in Obscura Collector's eyes made it impossible to dismiss as a mere fantasy. "What do you mean, capture moments in time?" I asked, my curiosity overcoming my fear. The figure reached out and gently touched the camera, tracing its brass details with a gloved finger. "With this camera, you can take a photograph of any moment, and it will become a reality. A moment frozen in time, ready to be revisited at your command." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded like a dream come true, a power that could change the course of history. But something about it felt inherently wrong, like tampering with the very fabric of reality. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice. Obscura Collector's grin widened, and they took a step closer. "Because, Sarah, I want to make a trade. I want something from your past, a moment that you regret, a moment that haunts your dreams. In exchange, I will give you this camera, and you can rewrite history in any way you see fit." My mind raced as I considered the offer. The thought of erasing my most painful memories was tempting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a price to be paid, a consequence for wielding such power. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked, my voice steady despite my inner turmoil. Obscura Collector's eyes darkened, and their tone grew menacing. "Then, Sarah, you will leave this place with your memories intact, but you will never see this camera again. And you will never know the true extent of its power." A chill ran down my spine as I weighed the options before me. The allure of the camera's potential was undeniable, but the cost was a heavy burden to bear. I couldn't help but wonder if there were others who had made this same choice and what had become of them. Before I could make a decision, a series of loud footsteps echoed through the warehouse, growing closer with each passing second. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was no longer alone in this desolate place. Obscura Collector's hooded gaze turned to the source of the commotion, their expression filled with dread. "We must go," they hissed, their voice laced with urgency. Without waiting for a response, they grabbed the camera from my hands and darted into the shadows. I hesitated for only a moment before following, my heart pounding in my chest. As we fled deeper into the warehouse, I caught glimpses of the intruders, men in dark suits, armed with flashlights and grim expressions. They were searching for something, and it was clear that they meant business. Obscura Collector led me through a labyrinthine maze of crumbling corridors and rusted machinery, our footsteps echoing in the darkness. I had no idea where we were headed, but I had no choice but to trust them. We finally reached a dead end that concealed a hidden door. Obscura Collector pushed it open, revealing a hidden chamber bathed in an eerie blue light. In the center of the room was a massive, ancient-looking contraption that resembled a cross between a telescope and a camera. "What is this place?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Obscura Collector turned to me, their eyes filled with desperation. "This is the heart of it all, Sarah. The place where time can be rewritten, where memories can be erased. But we must act quickly." Before I could comprehend their words, they gestured for me to step inside the chamber. "Place your hand on the device," they instructed. "It will scan your memories, and then we can proceed with the exchange." I hesitated for only a moment before obeying, my palm resting on the cold, metal surface. The chamber hummed to life, and I felt a strange sensation wash over me. A flood of memories, both joyful and painful, flashed before my eyes. As the memories played out, I realized that I had made my choice. There was one moment in my past, a moment of regret and guilt that I longed to erase. It was a moment that had haunted me for years, a moment I would give anything to forget. Obscura Collector nodded, their expression solemn. Very well, Sarah. The trade is complete. Before I could react, they handed me the antique camera, the camera with the power to rewrite history. It was a heavy weight in my hands, both a gift and a curse. We must go now, Obscura Collector urged, their urgency undiminished. They will not stop until they find us. With the camera clutched tightly in my hands, I followed Obscura Collector out of the hidden chamber and into the maze of the warehouse once more. The men in dark suits were closing in, their voices growing louder with each passing second. As we reached the warehouse's exit, Obscura Collector turned to me, their hooded gaze filled with gratitude. Remember, Sarah, the camera is a tool of great power. Use it wisely, and may it bring you the redemption you seek. With those words, they disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with the antique camera and the weight of my decision. The men in dark suits were nearly upon me, but I had a newfound determination. I raised the camera to my eye and pressed the shutter button, capturing a moment in time that would change my life forever. And with that, I vanished into the past, leaving behind the Craigslist conundrum and stepping into a world where the boundaries of reality were blurred, and the power to rewrite history was in my hands.